Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel, if you're new, and welcome back if you aren't. I'm EDJ, and we have finally gotten to the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And yeah, the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon was exiled on Elba. He ruled really well actually, it's actually amazing how well he did in Elba. But then he's like, screw that, I'm going back for my throne. So he goes back, one giant, I guess, last big campaign for Napoleon, and it all culminates in Waterloo, where him and the Duke of Wellington meet and fight, and then Bluebeard shows up, and then, yeah, GG Napoleon, and he dies on St. Helena, so I'll say my goodbyes to this series and thank yous for the end of this video. We're not done yet. And I will be looking at the Marshall series, by the way. I'm not giving up on that. So let's get to it. Let's watch Napoleon's final great battle at Waterloo. One of his first videos, too.
April 1814. For 10 years, one man has dominated Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French. Under his military genius, France conquered an empire that spanned the continent. But finally, he has been defeated by a grand coalition of his enemies. Napoleon is forced to abdicate and exiled to the tiny island of Elba, while the Bourbon monarchy is restored to France in the corpulent form of Louis XVIII.
I've said this before. Imagine you lived under the Bourbon, it's how you pronounce it, the Bourbon monarchy. Everything sucks, you hate it. And then the revolution comes, and it's like, oh, finally, something new, everything's gonna be great. And then that turns into a dictatorship bloodbath with constant guillotines because Robespierre is insane. Him and his entire posse of Jacobins. And then, finally, they get removed. But then, you have, the crappy next government that came after them. And then, all the rest of Europe's, jumping you. And then suddenly, this dude named Napoleon shows up. He constantly wins, he's popular, you love him. And then, he becomes, the first citizen, first guy of France. And it's like, alright, he's competent, he's good. Sure, the rest of Europe's still trying to jump us, but hey, we got Napoleon. And then Napoleon decides, I'm emperor now. I mean, granted, there was a vote, which may or may not have been rigged. Either way, you're like, oh, cool, we have a monarch again. I mean, it's an emperor, which is like a king on steroids, an even greater king, if you would. And so, under Napoleon, you're just, yeah, France is the powerhouse and it's expanding due to his empire, but we're constantly being jumped by everyone, and Britain hates us a lot, and Austria and Prussia are constantly throwing soldiers at us, and we're having to keep giving more men for defense and for Napoleon's ambitions. And then after so many years of that, finally it becomes too much. And then Napoleon's constantly calling on more people of France. Teenagers, children are now fighting. And now it's like, okay, now all the enemies that Napoleon has made have invaded literally the motherland of France. And then you finally just give up because you're finally done with Napoleon. You're like, I don't care, I want peace. We surrender. Bye, Napoleon. Napoleon gets kicked out. And then freaking this dude, Louis, comes back, the Bourbon monarchy, and then Napoleon shows back up, and it's like, oh, hi, Napoleon, how are you? And the rest of Europe jumps you again. And then Napoleon gets kicked out again. And now here you are with Louis again. And then you gotta be wondering, what was it all for? Why did we do all that? If we had just stayed with the monarchy in the first place, all that death, all of that suffering could have been avoided, right? If they oh my gosh. Imagine someone who lived through all that, seeing all that, and it's like, I'd be pissed, guys. I'd be like, what was all that for? Oh my goodness, dudes. I'm sorry, but I can't even imagine. Like, I can't even imagine what they must have been feeling. There must have been people who lived through all that, somehow, and it's like, I can't even imagine how they must have felt. You go through all that, just to end up in the monarchy again. It's, holy crap, I'm sorry. I lost my mind there for a second, but yeah, you just have to think, like, what was it all for? Why did we do all this? We could have just stayed put, less people would have died. Like, oh my gosh. Let's get to it.
But rumors soon reached Napoleon that France would welcome his return. The French people have little love for the monarchy or its hangers-on.
Yeah, at the monarchy, everyone was reminded, hey, remember when we got rid of these people because we hated them? Yeah. And I think there was also rumors that apparently Britain wasn't chill with Napoleon being near France. So I think there were rumors that Britain was just gonna straight up move Napoleon. So, yeah, Napoleon's eyes, hey, the people would seem receptive to me coming back. Also, Britain and the coalition might just try to remove me. Also, the king didn't give Napoleon his agreed pension. I think also Josephine died during his exile. So yeah, there were a lot of factors that pushed Napoleon to want to come back.
The very people whose excesses led to the French Revolution 25 years before. He also learns that at the Congress of Vienna, his enemies are locked in bitter dispute over the future of Europe. Napoleon decides to act. After just 10 months in exile, he returns to France, where the...
You know, assuming that... I know the British, apparently there were rumors. Every source I get, it's always rumors, but... Assuming Napoleon had bided his time for a few more years, you think he could have let France build up its strength, let his popularity be built up longer with the monarchy being hated, and then maybe he might have had a more favorable return? Well... Then again, he was already sick, wasn't he? By the time he returned to Waterloo, his health was already failing. So maybe he didn't have too much longer, now I think about it. Never mind. Yeah, it almost seems like... Yeah, it was almost like a now or never kind of thing, you know? Fortune favors the bold! Like, yeah. I'm unhinged, I'm sorry guys, I don't know what the heck's going on. I'm getting unhinged right now.
The troops sent to arrest him rally to his cause instead.
Which was so epic. Like, he was like... He literally took back France without even having to fire a single shot or killing one of his own countrymen. You know? He's like, hey, you know, if you want to murder your emperor, here I am. And they were like, hell no, we're gonna murder you. And they all came and just welcomed him and just rallied to him. The ultimate display of Napoleon's charisma, I think. And nothing like that awful Ridley Scott movie, you know, where he's crying like, I just want to go home. I just want to... No, the real Napoleon walked up to them and was like, hey, you want to murder me? Here I am. And they're like, no, we'll never do that to you. Like, not this, I just want to go home. Please let me go home. Like, you know.
Most of France soon follows suit. But in Vienna, the coalition immediately put their differences to one side. They declare Napoleon an outlaw and mobilize their forces for war.
Yeah, I think if Napoleon, like I said, I think it was the failing health most of all, but like, yeah, if Napoleon could have stayed there and waited more years, maybe he could have capitalized on even more dysfunctional Europe and a France that allowed itself to rebuild its strength. I really think, yeah. But then again, like I said, his health was already failing, that's one, so who knew how many years he had left. And, yeah, assuming the British were really adamant about straight up moving him, yeah, he probably didn't have the option to just wait there, but assuming that he did, it may have been smarter just to wait there for a few years, you know? Let everyone keep fighting each other, because his presence is the ultimate unifier, not only for France, but for his enemies. They're like, oh, all our beef, null and void, because our beef with Napoleon is even greater than our beef with ourselves, you know?
Napoleon knows he must act boldly
You really
before
do.
the coalition launches a coordinated invasion of France. He counts on winning a quick victory and then negotiating peace from a position of strength.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. I mean, you know, I said last video, the last two, in my opinion, the last two chances Napoleon had at securing power for himself were A, winning Leipzig, that failed, and B, accepting the frickin' Frankfurt proposals. After those two, him refusing and failing at those two, I don't think he ever had a chance of remaining Emperor of France. And I know this was his plan, win a decisive victory, negotiate, and I think I know a lot of people who agree with that, but just my opinion, I don't think that was gonna work, guys. I really think at this point they were done with Napoleon. I really don't think, even if he had won Waterloo, I think he would have to fight a lot more battles, and then it would just kind of be the replay of the 6 Days campaign, him jumping back and forth with a weakened France, trying to fight everyone, and just everyone gunning in until they get to Paris again. Like, I really think Napoleon was done at this point. There was nothing he could do, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Who knows? Maybe if Napoleon had won Waterloo, maybe he could have secured peace. But even then, after that, what's to stop another coalition war in the next few years? Like I said, Napoleon was done, and France was beyond exhausted in terms of resources, manpower. Just, I'm sorry, I really don't think Napoleon's plan was gonna work.
He targets the coalition armies within easiest reach: Prince Blücher's Prussian army and the Duke of Wellington's Anglo-Allied army, both camped in Belgium. Napoleon's force is a match for either coalition army on its own, but he'll be heavily outnumbered if they're able to join forces, so he must keep them apart and defeat each in turn.
And it is unfortunate that he chose, I think in terms of ranking of generals and like leaders of the Napoleonic era, Wellington and Blücher are among the top of the list. It's unfortunate not only that they were close and paired together, but that they were the first ones Napoleon chose to attack, you know? Because yeah, man, he was dealing with two very great leaders at the same time. Yeah, straight up just invades. Holy crap. Yeah, this is different from his usual style. I love that. Like Napoleon's like a freaking meteor going straight into the Netherlands. This is a really weird... It almost feels like a different YouTuber entirely. Man.
Napoleon's army crosses the frontier near Charleroi, intending to drive a wedge between the two coalition armies. The next day, Napoleon sends his left wing under Marshal Ney to take the crossroads at Quatre Bras. There, Ney clashes with Wellington's army, still scrambling into position. The Allied troops fight off a series of French attacks and just manage to hold their ground. The same day, Napoleon attacks Blücher's Prussian army with his main force near the village of Ligny. The battle is a brutal slugging match, but the French emerge triumphant. The 72-year-old Blücher leads a cavalry charge in person and has his horse killed under him. He only just escapes capture. the Prussian army retreats, but it is not broken. Napoleon sends his right wing under Marshal Grouchy to keep them on the run, and turns his own attention to Wellington's army. The British general doesn't receive news of Blücher's defeat until the next morning, at which point he orders a retreat through heavy summer showers to a position 8 miles south of Brussels, near the village of Waterloo. There he receives a promise from Blücher that the Prussians will march to his aid the next morning. So Wellington decides to stand and fight. Wellington has chosen his battlefield with care. His troops are behind a gentle ridge which will give them some shelter from French cannon fire.
You have to give it to Wellington. The man is the master of defense. Like, his defense game has demonstrated through, you know, the Spanish campaign. He just always picked the right battlefield that favors him. He always picked the right, you know, the right time to fight on his own terms. And he was just so good at defense, man. Like, yeah.
His right flank is anchored on the farmhouse of Hougoumont, his centre on the farm of La Haye-Sainte, and his left on the farm of Papelotte. All three are fortified and garrisoned with elite troops. Wellington's men need every advantage they can get. The opposing armies are roughly equal in size, but his is a ragtag mix of British, Dutch, and German troops, many of whom have never seen combat before. They will have to hold off Napoleon's army of veterans until Prussian reinforcements arrive, or the battle and probably the war will be lost.
Yeah, I don't mean any disrespect to Wellington, but a lot of people are like, he defeated Napoleon, and it's really like, not really. It was him and Blücher. Like, you know, his strategy was hold the line until Blücher comes. That was kind of their whole thing, right? So yeah, Blücher, even before I watched this series, like I didn't know much about Blücher. I always attributed solely to Wellington, but it's like, yeah, Blücher deserves as much praise for defeating Napoleon as Wellington, you know? The man really got sadly underestimated, you know? Yeah. Underrated, dare I say.
Sunday dawns bright and fair. Napoleon has ordered Marshal Grouchy to pursue the Prussians and keep them busy, while he defeats Wellington's army at Waterloo and opens the road to Brussels. But it's Grouchy who gets pinned down, fighting the Prussian rearguard at Wavre. The main Prussian force eludes him and is already marching to Wellington's aid. At Waterloo, Napoleon delays his attack, waiting for the ground to dry, which will make movement easier for his troops.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of factors that affected Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. One, his health, which was already failing. And two, yeah, a big thing I've heard a lot is that Napoleon wanted to start the battle much sooner, but due to the heavy rain of the night before, it resulted in the terrain like being muddy and unfavorable, so he had to delay, and those precious hours really stopped and hindered Napoleon and his movements. And that, you know, a lot of people have speculated if it hadn't rained, or if, you know, Napoleon had been able to accomplish his earlier attack as intended, he probably would have won, you know?
But the lost hours will later prove costly.
Yep.
The battle begins around 11 a.m., when Napoleon orders a feint against Wellington's right flank at Hougoumont. He hopes Wellington will commit his reserves here, drawing them away from the centre, where the main blow will fall. But Hougomont's British and German defenders cling on desperately throughout the day. At one point, the French force their way through the main gate, but it's shut behind them. and the intruders are all killed. Wellington later calls it the decisive moment of the battle.
Dang.
Around noon, 80 French cannon open fire against the main Allied line. Most of Wellington's men are out of sight on the reverse slope, but many cannonballs still find their mark, smashing bloody holes in the Allied ranks. At 1:30 p.m, Napoleon sends in his infantry. The French columns are met by disciplined musket fire, and then charged by British heavy cavalry. The French attack disintegrates as Napoleon's men try to save themselves from the crushing hooves and flashing sabres. Scores of Frenchmen are ridden down, and 2 of their famous Eagle standards are captured. But the British cavalry, exhilarated by success, charge too far. They become scattered, their horses blown. At their most vulnerable, they're countercharged by French cavalry and suffer terrible losses. Among the dead, Major General Sir William Ponsonby, commander of the Union Brigade. Around 4 p.m, Marshal Ney thinks he sees the Allies begin to retreat and leads a mass cavalry charge.
Yeah, you know, we've learned so much about Ney. And unfortunately, even when before I came into the series, all I knew Ney for was his ill-timed charge, his failed charge at Waterloo. And it's sad because he's such a cool dude who did so much cool things, but this charge has, I think, defined his reputation and defined what most people know him for, and it's unfortunate. But yeah.
To drive home the advantage. But Ney is wrong. The Allied infantry are ready, formed in hollow squares, with bayonets fixed. The French cavalry can't break into these impregnable formations. They can only circle impotently until they retreat or are shot from the saddle. Ney's failure to support this attack with either infantry or artillery is a serious blunder.
Super. Like, I believe Napoleon used artillery to blow square formations to allow the cavalry to charge in. He just went in with just the cavalry, yeah. It's so weird of Ney to make... Like, obviously he saw they were retreating, that's fair, but... You know, it's weird to see Ney make a blunder like that, because even before this, Ney... I can't recall any serious blunders from him. Like, this was definitely not his finest hour, dare I say. You know? And it's sad, because this is what ultimately defined him.
Meanwhile, Blücher's Prussians have begun to arrive. They capture the village of Plancenoit, threatening Napoleon's flank and forcing him to send reserves to recapture it. Around 6 p.m, French infantry finally capture the farmhouse of La Haye-Sainte in the center of the battlefield. It allows the French to bring forward artillery and blast the Allied squares from close range. They can't miss the closely packed formations, and casualties quickly mount.
Yeah, this is arguably where Ney Price should have made the charge, right? Finally with the support of artillery, but...
It begins to seem that if Wellington's army doesn't retreat, it will be killed where it stands.
Yep. Dang,
but
Wellington,
the situation
man.
for Napoleon is also desperate. The Prussians are arriving in force, and he's running out of men to throw against Wellington's army. So he turns to his ultimate reserve, the elite Imperial Guard, the most feared troops in Europe.
Yeah, who, Napoleon didn't use too much. Or at least less compared to everyone else because of their famed reputation and skill, and Napoleon didn't want to shatter that. I believe he sends them forward and they get demolished, unfortunately. The heck is this person? I'm sorry, it's just I got a weird message at the moment on Instagram. But yeah, like, yeah, sadly the guard gets blasted and just demolished, and their reputation is destroyed. At least I think that's how it goes. I might be wrong.
Europe.
Is that better?
The finely crafted Volks.
At 7:30 p.m., 3,000 of these battle-hardened veterans march past their emperor and across the corpse-strewn battlefield towards the Allied centre. Wellington's redcoats rise to meet them and pour devastating volleys of musket fire into their ranks. When the Allies fix bayonets and prepare to charge, the Imperial Guard wavers and then retreats.
Just shattered, right? The myth of this guard, man. Just like that.
Wellington, sensing victory, orders a general advance. About the same time, the Prussians recapture Plancenoit. News of the Imperial Guard's defeat and rumors of encirclement by the Prussians sweep through the French ranks. Panic breaks out, and the French army flees the battlefield. Only Napoleon's old guard maintain their discipline, mounting a heroic but doomed rearguard action. Napoleon himself is forced to abandon his carriage and barely escapes the pursuing Prussian cavalry. The battle is won. The Duke of Wellington and Prince Blücher meet and congratulate each other outside Napoleon's former headquarters, an inn called La Belle Alliance. Blücher thinks it's the perfect name for their shared victory, but Wellington prefers the more English-sounding Waterloo, where he has his own headquarters. The Battle of Waterloo was, in the words of the Duke of Wellington, a damned near-run thing. It was also one of the bloodiest battles of the age. Around 50,000 men were killed or wounded, 23,000 coalition casualties, 27,000 French. Due to an appalling shortage of medical care, many of the wounded were left lying on the battlefield for several days. Napoleon was utterly defeated. Unable to raise another army, he surrendered to the British. They transported him to a second exile on the tiny, remote Atlantic island of St. Helena. This time there was no escape. He died there 6 years later. Waterloo marked the beginning of a period of relative peace in Europe. There were no wars between the great powers for 40 years, and the British would not fight on the continent for another 100 years, until the summer of 1914.
Yep.
40 years after the battle, a pioneer in the new art of photography captured these remarkable images. They're veterans of Napoleon's armies,
Holy
by then
crap.
all old men in their 70s and 80s. Among them, Sergeant Tanya of the Imperial Guard.
That is so weird. We literally got pictures of dudes who were in this, like... Oh, that's insane. We could literally see the veterans of Napoleon, like, you know? Man. I think it goes to show just... I mean, obviously it happened a long time ago, but, like... Still how close in a weird way it is, you know?
Moray of the 2nd Regiment of Hussars. And Verline of the 2nd Guard Lancers. These faces are a tantalizing link to the dramatic events that shaped the course of history 2 centuries ago.
Yeah, they look battle-hardened, these men. Charles Nove, great job. And we've done it, my friends. We have gone through the entire Napoleonic experience. And I have to say, this has been really an enjoyable ride. I've loved this series. And I'm gonna watch the Marshalls next, but really after that it's done. Like, yeah, man, this is insane. Like, you know, this was just a really fun experience. I got to meet so many new people, and you know, got to experience so much more comments, and this was just really a great experience, and I'm really sad now that we've made it through, because a lot of this was me trying to get through it, you know. I was pumping these videos out, I was recording, and now it's like, oh, well, onto something new, I guess. But, you know, it's like, yeah. And we're technically not done, because I will be back for Napoleon, and when he continues his Egypt series at the moment. There's still not a second episode at the date of this recording. And yeah, just overall, this was really fun. I think I already knew a good general bit about Napoleon before going into this, mainly his later career, as I hopefully demonstrated through these videos. But it was so much fun to look deeper into it, you know? And I think what I really loved most about this series is that I loved reading the quotes about all these epic quotes that I never knew so many people said. And learning about the Marshalls, I loved learning about it. I figured out who the heck Davout was, my favorite Marshal. I didn't know he existed until this series, until the Battle of Vienna. I was like, who is this guy, Davout? Like, you know, learning about the Marshalls. It's like, learning about all the military minds of the time, like Bluecourt and Wellington and, you know, just, you know, Archduke Charles, and just being amazed, having a bigger perspective on the Napoleonic era in a way I didn't before. And it's just witnessing the rise of this great conqueror, arguably the greatest conqueror, you know, of all time in general. And, you know, it's like I oddly enough became attached to a lot of these people, and now it's just over, you know? And yeah, some go on to do pretty well in their lives, but, you know, it's like, it's a little sad. It's like when your favorite TV show ends and now everyone just goes on their own ways. Napoleon dies defeated and depressed on Helena, and so many people go, and it's just like, at this, like, yeah, I said France had the strongest army. They had the best army in the world, I think, under Napoleon. And just so much military genius, not just from Napoleon, but from the people working around him and under him. It's like the perfect storm France had, I think. And it was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful to experience, and I'm looking forward to, you know, the Marshall series, and which I think I'll just watch in one go. I know it's 3 hours long, but it might be a really long video to upload, but I'm willing to go through all of it in one go. I feel like it'll be better for me, at least in that regard. And yes, my friends, that is it. I hope you overall enjoyed this series with me, and hearing me talk and ramble a lot. And I look forward to many more if any of you choose to stick around. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.